All right, everyone, welcome back to Interviews from the Wasteland. Today we've got the Otter. I've done a podcast with him, but that was about a year ago, maybe a little bit longer. Do you remember?
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, I had a
We,
good time.
a lot of food for thought, as usual when I talk to you.
Well, it's great to have you back. It's great to be able to sit down and chat again. Um, so one of the things that I wanted to bring up was your Towards a Vitalistic Christianity article. Because
Yeah.
I also recently published an article on vitalism that was sort of inspired by the existence of this article, and I wanted to go into some of your ideas surrounding the seeming tension, social tension between vitalistic ideas and Christianity as a whole. So go ahead.
Well, I mean, it all comes originally from Nietzsche's polemic, the Antichrist, and it's all about Christianity being life denying rather than life affirming because they're putting off their salvation to the afterlife. So then this becomes within Christianity all sorts of directions it can go. You have people who talk about works being important, the Catholics in particular, and then you have sola scriptura, which is something I relied on actually for this article. And there's a counterintuitive sense that living through scripture gives you vitality in your day-to-day circumstances. And I'm just observing my Christian friends. I'm not Christian in particular, and I do see vitalistic elements to some of their projects. Some of them I do see drifting into the life denial. And I just figured maybe I can kind of put to paper a sort of path other people could follow intellectually, maybe little leads here and there, if
Hmm.
you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, for me, I just wanted to kind of pinpoint what I was seeing and try to put it on paper.
Yeah, well, so to get back to the original concept, I think maybe we should define vitalism in the way that we're using it because I recently published my article on the topic. I don't know if you've seen it yet, where I
Yeah, I
was
did. I
looking
took
at
a
the
read
way.
before.
Oh, well, thank you. But I was looking at the way that vitalistic concepts sort of grow in our political space and how they're moving ideologically. And an individual quote restacked me and then provided an extremely esoteric definition of vitalism, where he was referencing a sort of like vital essence that separates man from animals. And so, briefly, for the sake of the audience, I'm going to narrow the definition of vitalism a little bit for the purposes of this conversation, just so they're clear on what we're talking about. And in this case, I'm referring to the spirit of the individual and the people, and the way that separates both people from animals and people from other people. So the strong and the metaphysically wise and the spiritually aware as being separate from the weak and the spiritually unconscious and metaphysically retarded, so to speak, groups. So for that point, that's sort of how I'm trying to define it, and I believe that you use a pretty similar definition of vitalism in your article, where you are talking about the postponing of strength in the present in exchange for a supposed reward in the afterlife, which is a very strange paradox to me because I don't see that being an either or kind of situation.
Um, yeah, well, let me unpack a few things you said. As for the
Go for it.
definition, I would go just even more bare bones personally, just because it invites more theses to be thrown into this Vitalist project, like Vitalist magazine, where that article was published. We loosely define it within our Discord for contributors who are interested in contributing. You could if you want to. That it just means life affirmation in general, philosophy that promotes the affirmation of life in that yes, the metaphysical strength we talked about to approach this reality without any copium. Just to put it in the purest
That's
layman
pretty
speak,
good. Yeah, I like that.
zero copium. And just aligning your actions towards that and away from these ways of thinking that trap you in these cycles of life denial, of copium. So, yeah, there is always a metaphysical baggage you're going to have to import here. And I think what the note you saw was probably mentioning Bergenson's Elan Vital, which does kind of take something kind of like Darwin's natural selection, but turning it into like a spiritual, metaphysical essence inside of you that would separate you from other people who lack it. So, yeah, that's the problem with vitalism. It can go in all sorts of branches and directions. But I think at this point, that wide umbrella will let us explore it and borrow from each other and come up with a coherent theory because this was something that kind of died in the cradle in the interwar period. It was very
Hmm.
popular. Then World War II came and everyone stopped talking about it.
Well, and that's because to support the strength of your people as just an objective social Darwinian standard was associated with the villains of World War II. So in the post-war era, it was treated as sort of the devil.
That's certainly a
ideology.
huge part of it, and the whole Nietzschean connection until Kaufman rehabilitated him by writing the thesis of a liberal Nietzsche. All that happened in Turnen, but it was already kind of on the outs with National Socialism in general. They imported it in a different way because the Elan Vital it becomes more of a collective concept instead of something within you. Yeah, so individualistic versus a collective interpretation of it, I guess. And the Vitalists were more so on the individualist Nietzschean spectrum of those discussions.
Yeah, it's definitely coming back into favor now. The idea of the people as a unit and the individual as a unit, and the desire to be strong in that. I deeply enjoyed referencing Plato in that because Plato is his fight name, and the idea that a person's philosophy can make them a strong person or a weak person, I think, is very important when it comes to these sorts of discussions because you have a bunch of we do live in an age where there's a bunch of progressives whose ideology has made them weak and stupid, and
Yeah,
there are alternatives. And vitalism is an emphasis on attempting to be strong and wise regardless of your circumstances.
yeah. I don't often give credit to Plato, but absolutely, philosophy is something that permeates existence. And if you're not much into philosophy, you can get one of those little introduction to philosophy, popcorn reading books they sell at airports, and they tie in all kinds of real world connections. You kind of start to see how these progressive assumptions can just like tentacles spread throughout culture and modify the way we think about things and approach problems.
That's true. What is it? I saw this popping up, I think, over the last year after we did our last podcast together, but there was Lord forgive me for I am evil and retarded is the Christian's prayer. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not wrong. I mean, the idea is, and this is where I come at it from like a Christian perspective on vitalism, is that Christianity I don't see to be a life denying ideology. Unless the people are already life denying and are looking for a way to be life denying. I see it as a way to accept the imperfections of being alive and move on without having to cope about them. Because one of the issues I have found with a lot of pagan histories and belief systems is that they cope so hard about occasionally doing things that are stupid or occasionally doing things that they know to be wrong but did anyway. And because there's not a system by which they can seek absolution, functionally seek absolution for being retards, they have a much harder time moving on from those sorts of mistakes than Christians do, because Christians sort of accept the imperfections of the human condition.
Well, that is the argument that the person who actually helped me with the Christian citations in that article is a seminarian's log, and he gave me that exact same argument. I fall on the other side of. I'm not a big fan of the whole, we're born sinners, etc.
Yeah, I'm not a
And that,
fan
that
of
is a
that either.
contention for me, actually. But I do see the potential to turn that into a vitalistic argument. So we don't need to pick straws on it. But that's something that I don't know. I mean, I know we're born imperfect. I'm not saying we're born gods, but I don't know. Just the whole guilt complex coming through Catholicism, which I was something I was raised with. You can import a lot of quirky morality within that guilt complex that makes me a little hesitant to accept it.
I mean, I suppose that's fair, and that's one of the reasons why it's a little trickier in Christianity. But the alternative is significantly weaker. Like if you look at the way the progressives handle human imperfection, it's kill them. If they're not perfect, just put them in the guillotine. And I don't mean that metaphorically. I mean that is how the Soviet Union and the French Revolution and every major sort of secular progressive movement has functioned. Is
Well,
just
the
a
current
huge
the
mess.
current ones are kind of the extreme opposite of that. It's just accept everyone, period. Never
Well, it isn't
criticize,
though.
which is even worse. I
Well,
know it. In theory, if they had their perfect world and they mandated it on everyone,
yes,
that would be what it would be.
in theory, they would mandate everybody behave in a certain way, and then they would kill anybody who fell short of that mandate.
Well,
Um,
they're kind of operating on a similar argument I actually heard from Focus on the Family is a tolerance of intolerance, I think they called it back in
yeah,
the day on Christian talk radio in America. This one stuck with me where you can't be tolerant of things that are intolerant to you. So I think that's what they're operating on. So it's similar to the Christian form of tolerance that they'll tolerate anyone within their belief structure, but exclude anyone who doesn't fit in. So it's not a true liberalism, but that's why we can differentiate them with as progressives.
well, I mean, even if you go back to the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, what people would do is just accuse each other of marginally falling short of the stated ideal in order to get their neighbors in the guillotine. And then you saw the same thing happen again in the Soviet Union. And now you're seeing it and I feel a little outdated in saying this because they're losing, but you're seeing this again with cancel culture, where anybody who's ever said anything that they find offensive, they go after, even if it's 10, 20, 30 years later. And so I see progressivism as one of its fundamental flaws is an incapacity to handle with finesse individuals who do not adhere or in the past have not adhered to their belief system.
Yeah,
Because you
I
can have
mean,
like hardcore liberals, and then it turns out 6 years ago they said something racist on a bus once, and they're done. They're
yeah,
going after their
that
job. They're
would be
going after
most like
everything.
rigid ideologies, I would argue.
Mhm. I agree.
I
That
mean,
is
in a sense, that's kind of for better or worse what separated liberalism at its peak. We can't really say it so much anymore for liberalism, but at its peak when the ACLU was defending neo Nazis in court for the sake of free speech, that kind of a ideal, I guess, it's just I don't see it as really plausible to enforce for long periods of history.
Well, I would argue that at its peak, liberalism was heavily. So my argument about liberalism for a while is that it is heavily based on a Christian foundation, which recognizes the universal dignity of man in the eyes of God, and that by attacking its own foundation, which liberalism always does, because it sees any imposition or social taboo as an imposition on individual freedom, uh, it removes that buffer that it has in its own foundation and then creates for itself a house of cards, which promptly collapses. And you saw that in the Soviet Union, and you've seen that in the United States once liberalism successfully removed Christianity from its own foundation post 1990. My argument is that you're going to see it again. You're going to see something very interesting happen in China because they're functionally the only governing apparatus and body in the world that's purely secular at this point. And I'm really curious to see where they go. But I would argue that they're more like fascism with communist characteristics at this point, for lack of better phrasing. But I am watching that country very closely just to see how their sociology develops.
Yeah, well, I mean, these terms all get so messy. When that's why I would separate the Soviet Union distinctively as like its own sort of philosophical course. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you seem to be trying to uh, point towards something inherent in all left political movements that
I'm
leads in
arguing
this
it's inherent.
direction, but I'm
I'm
not
arguing it's inherent
100%
in
sure
secular.
what that
I'm
would
arguing
be.
it's inherent in
Secular,
secular
okay.
systems.
Um, but are non-secular systems faring much better at the moment? I
Good
mean,
question. So
the
what do we
Middle
have
East
that's
would be our go-to example, I would say, and I don't know if Saudi Arabia is faring any better than the rest of us.
I mean, outside of the war that they're involved in right now, I would argue that they are faring better than the rest of us. Heck, I'd argue that the Iranians have a great deal more moral certainty than Western progressives do.
Well, Iran's a unique situation because we've pretty much put them in the stasis chamber,
Sure.
but the other countries who are
Afghanistan?
exposed to the system, the global system, I mean, they have falling birth rates. The Middle East in general has the highest obesity rates, surpassing the USA now. So they've imported a lot of the same social ills. So I'm not really seeing religion as a buffer, honestly.
I would argue that the religious parts of the Middle East seem to be doing relatively well. Afghanistan, for instance, once the Americans were booted out, which itself is an impressive feat. Let's be honest. It took 20 years of war. There's kids who grew up that are old enough to drink now, that lived their entire lives in a state of war in that country. And granted, every country that's ever tried to invade Afghanistan fails, but that's not the point. The Afghans, I believe, have recovered a significant fraction of their fertility rate.
That tends to happen post wars. There tends to be a population boom. I just wonder if we give them 30, 40 years
Yeah,
of
it's,
development, if they're going
it's
to fall
almost
into the
that
same
far.
trap.
As of 2025, Afghanistan's fertility rate is 3.63. It is declining from the fertility rate in 23, which is 4.84. But bumped up. It probably bumped up right after the Americans left. So I'd need to see a more long range
I mean, this trend is
view of
just, it's
that.
happening in counterintuitive countries. I just
True.
read Thailand now has a worse than Korea at this exact moment.
All right, so that's
So,
because all right, so this is actually really interesting. I've been following this like a hawk. The last 2 years, the fertility rate in Korea has gone up, like
but
from
marginally, it's
point
like
0.7.
tiny.
Well, it's gone up from point 0.7 to 1.08.
I think that was a brief blip. I think it's back below 0.98. I think now these things just fluctuate rapidly, but they're just their outlook, their long term outlook is still not good. Is what I'm trying to drive at because I mean the numbers are going to
It's
change
not
here and
good.
there.
All right. Actually, so why don't we move on to that question then? One of the arguments that I've heard about this is from Rudyard Lynch, who I would love to get on here sometime, but I'm not nearly big enough to talk to him yet. Subscribe to my Substack so that one day I can bother Rudyard Lynch and put him on a podcast. But the interesting idea that he's presented is that there's a mammalian social collapse that happens at sufficient population densities, and that they are it's the Mass Utopia thing from John Calhoun,
Yeah, familiar
and
with it.
yeah, and that is the cause of the global population contraction that we're witnessing.
But I don't know if it
Thoughts?
applies to a place like Thailand, where the average person isn't really financially stable. They have a higher household debt than the United States. I didn't even know this. They're all spending
Really?
everything on credit cards, but they're buying living expenses on credit cards rather than
Oh,
new car
good
or
point.
something. So it's looking bleak for them because then the whole consumer debt structure collapses if they can't keep the population up. So it seems to be like the very burden of debt itself that is preventing people from having children there.
I could actually that would make a good argument that it is debt that is preventing childbirth, because that is something basically the entire world is in right now, is various states of debt at a global scale.
Everyone has a little at the moment. It's, more or less
Um,
unavoidable because to get ahead with certain things, you have to straddle yourself with a little debt.
I image of a little goblin rubbing its hands with gold coins sitting on a pile of gold coins right now.
That's for
Um,
sure, man.
so I think that is one of the issues. I also think that it does seem to correlate. It doesn't seem super causal based on further analysis, but it does seem to correlate that the quantity of urbanization in a society correlates to a reduction in the fertility rate, a pretty significant one. More rural societies don't seem to suffer from it, so it could be physical living.
Yeah, but then you get into a trap of like a population boom means you've got to mechanize your agriculture, and then you lose the rural birth rates because you have a lot less small farms. The whole thing is a trap, really. So I just I don't know. We need a whole new approach to the birth rate problem, and the Hungarian model had small results, but even that wasn't good enough. Throwing money at families didn't have
Yeah,
the desired
Hungary is
result.
1.5 now, which isn't great. The UAE is 1.21.
1.21. Yeah, you need
Yeah,
2.1 for context to replace. Yeah, I think we were
this is
1.2 before the program. So, zero point 0.3 is not bad, but for the amount of money that was thrown into the program, it's a pretty pitiful result, unfortunately.
yeah. Basically, all the countries with a positive birth rate are sub-Saharan Africa, with the exception of who else has a high birth rate? Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Israel, of course, Palestine, Pakistan,
Wonder what Israel's
Afghanistan,
doing right.
Kazakhstan,
I do believe it's the
Uzbekistan,
Orthodox to keep the
Turkmenistan,
population up there.
Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Mongolia. All right,
Uh,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your list, but yeah, we got a lot of Central Asians there at the end, which I think will go down. But I was saying, I wonder what Israel's doing right, but I do think it's their Orthodox population, whereas every other group is dropping. I'm not an expert on that, but in Central Asia, I mean, there's some rapid urbanization happening as we speak, so I would expect that to quickly start plummeting within the next 5, 10 years.
It could. One
There's
of
a
the
lot of
interesting things.
Chinese investment right now there. They're
True.
massive building projects.
Well, as I understand it, they're trying to build a financial center that's not in Western Europe,
Yeah,
because Western Europe is going to fall.
yeah. They're building
Um,
up in Kazakhstan, and I I visited Tashkent a year ago, and there's
yeah,
tons
how
of
was that?
Chinese construction.
Cool. They're good at it. They've got a lot of experience building shit right now.
BYD
One thing,
cars everywhere, Southeast Asia. I mean,
dude,
rather Central Asia.
so many BYD cars that. So, like, I generally try to steer away from like glazing China for any reason ever, but I will give them credit for their electric vehicle industry. They're the ones who have currently developed, like through BYD and some of these other companies, electric vehicle battery hot swap. So you pull into a little thing, and in 2 minutes they just give you a new battery and you drive off. And these are like $50,000 batteries. These are very 15,000 at least. Very expensive batteries. But their hot swap tech allows people to get a new battery instead of taking 2 hours to recharge their battery, which is what makes electric vehicles effective. It's what makes electric vehicles competitive. There we go with internal combustion.
Well, they're also selling them dirt cheap. They're not cheap in the West because of the tariffs, but in those countries, you get one of those cars off the lot for like 20K. So it's competitive. It's very competitive against combustion engines.
Which is why China's not hurting as bad as most other countries during the current petroleum crisis.
Yeah, well, interesting. I have a little story about petroleum market. So the very first, very important, maybe not the first, but most important OPEC meeting in the 70s when we had the oil crisis, the Iranians wanted to keep raising the prices. And Saudi Arabia, taking a lesson from history, was talking about the rubber industry because the Brits used to have a monopoly on it. All the high yield rubber trees were growing in Malaysia on the plantations they owned, and they were trying to squeeze everyone else in the market, so it became basically a weapons rush to create synthetic rubber. And the Americans achieved it. The Brits' monopoly imploded overnight. So the Saudis were worried that there would be a similar innovation just push to replace oil if they squeezed the market. So they end up
Mhm.
flooding the market with 500 million barrels of oil, driving the price down and ending the oil crisis and leading towards the economic boom of the 80s. So
Uh,
interesting the directions innovation go if you wanted to.
yeah, I think that the direction innovation is going to move away from oil to a large degree. But I also think that the way we're going about limiting that stockpile is going to be a disaster. It's bad, man.
Well,
Um,
something we should prepare for
oh, it's
sooner. I mean,
bad.
nuclear reactors take 5 years minimum to build, and we could
Maybe,
have
maybe in
easily
Europe.
replaced so much of this old infrastructure based on petroleum, but it politically wasn't convenient.
The United States is turning into Byzantium. We functionally, our legal code is so messed up in the United States that we just can't build shit anymore. I mean, have you seen the Hyperloop in California? That's way easier than a nuclear reactor.
Yeah, well, California, oh my God. Yeah, never get anything done there. It's insane. But the red tape is not only on the state level, though. It's the federal government intervenes too. And I don't know. They only cut red tape for political favors, unfortunately. They're not going to cut red tape for raw innovation.
No. Although the current United States push to acquire a rare earth supply is seeing a fair bit of red tape getting cut, which is
Yeah,
good for me. Like that's an industry that I'm not too far from. So we need the United States needs nuclear power. We need rare earth mining. We need a bunch of stuff that we're just not getting because environmentalists have screwed our entire country for decades.
yeah. I mean, there's definitely something happening there, but that's more of like a rollback to the looser laws of before. Whereas going to uncharted territories is a bit different. Like thorium reactors. There's a model though at the moment. I think the data center push might actually cause an adoption of this technology because the current electric grids can't handle the demands these tech companies need. So they may want a small little thorium reactor right next to their data center.
I mean, hopefully they'll pay for that. Although a good chunk of the data center build out is not happening. I think close to half the data center projects have been quietly canceled in the United. Have you been
Yeah,
following that?
a little bit, not as closely as I'd like to, but I do know there's a lot of pushback, so it becomes politically inconvenient to build such things at the same
Well,
time. But the bubble depends on it, so they'll find a place
yeah.
to put them.
Well, it's because the bubble has been less growth oriented than people were hoping. There's not a whole lot of profit coming out of the AI space or any. But the United States needs the AI bubble in order to prop up the failing production economy.
Yeah, well, there is the hardware production element in the bubble that makes it a little bit more safe than maybe the .com bubble, but yeah, it's not enough.
The problem with the all right, so I'm going to get into the economics a little bit with the AI bubble. Uh, the GPUs that are used to power AI data centers, they don't last for more than like 3 or 4 or 5 years, and so they partially they burn out, and partially better GPU tech is developed over the course of 5 or 6 years, and so a lot of the hardware that they're building out has a very narrow lifespan, and and so the economic engine that the AI companies are building doesn't actually have supportive infrastructure that they're constructing that can be put to other uses in the future. They are just sort of building warehouses. It's sort of like the Chinese Ghost City thing, where we're building a bunch of stuff, but we don't have any guarantee that it's going to be productive in the long term. Now, if they actually do get around to building small modular atomic reactors around their data centers, those are going to be real infrastructure. But I am worried that the AI bubble, when and if it pops, could cause just a catastrophe in the global markets because they didn't actually build anything that can be put to use for other purposes.
Well, the counter argument would be that with enough development, these AI systems will actually be able to achieve what we hope they can achieve now. And I mean, to a degree, it does. I mean, I'm using Claude Code constantly, and it's not as great as all the Twitter threads make you think it is, but it's an invaluable resource at the same time. So it's hard to say if it will hit the plateau, and you're buying AI products on a discount right now. Rather, not on a discount right now, you're going to get wrecked, or if it's going to actually pay off and you're buying on a discount right now. I totally mixed that one up and made it very confusing. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if it does pay off, then there's tons of money to be made. But if it doesn't pay off, then we're fucked. Yeah.
One of the companies that I've been looking at pretty carefully, and I do plan on actually putting money into them, is Hyundai. Have you been following what they're up to?
No, let me know.
So Hyundai is planning a multi tens of thousands rollout of humanoid robots into their factories, and
Mm,
they have built the first factory functional humanoid robot, as far as I can tell. And they're using their precision electric motors because they went to electric vehicle production, and so they have the motor capability for to actually run these things. They've got the
mm,
battery tech to make them work, and they've got the factories that can use $200,000 robots to actually replace people. So
interesting.
my suspicion is that Hyundai is going to be the robotics play that's actually going to make some of these things work.
Yeah, it sounds like they got everything lined up for them, and they can make a proof of concept by deploying it to their own factories and saving money in the whole in the whole scheme of it. Yeah, it's
I'll
brilliant if it
include a
pays off for
picture
them.
below. I'll include a picture below for the recordings. Let me there's a spot to add notes in the recording, so be sure to let me know if there's anything that we need to add. I'll put your vitalistic article in there too, of course. So yeah, I think that there's stuff going on in the AI space, but I think that most of it is hype, and we're either going to see a market crash down or a market crash up. And I don't know which way it'll go, but
Yep,
are you
I
familiar with the
agree.
crash up concept?
Not in those words, but I mean, yeah, I mean that's exactly what would happen if we really do break this bottleneck of the AI not really doing what it's supposed to be doing, hallucinating too much, making it impractical for enterprise purposes.
Crash up can either mean a sudden increase of the valuation of these companies, or it can mean a sudden and radical devaluation of the global currency.
Mm,
It could be either one. And the global currency system is not at this time in time. It
yeah.
looks to me from this perspective in the ongoing Middle East.
Yeah, no, that all bodes very poorly right now for sure.
How about what where you are?
Well, I am not much of a driver, so I'm not actually sure. But I know my gas prices for my apartment are ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm in the United States where gasoline have doubled. Plane tickets have start seeing supplies because the cost of diesel has gone up, and the entire American economy runs on diesel. So it could
But
get
what do you make of
pretty
Trump
nasty.
dismissing people's concerns on this? Because I keep seeing clips of him being ambushed by journalists, and he says, "I don't care, $200 a barrel, we can do it."
I mean, we, the United States as a country, can do it. We, as the people of the United States, cannot do it. Um,
That's exactly my concern.
Yeah, he hasn't managed to make a whole lot of friends with this war in Iran. I do think that there's a long-term reason for it. I think I wrote you may have seen the article on it, which is that
That
if
one
we
I
can
haven't
control
read.
the global petroleum supply, we can prevent the Chinese from trying to invade Taiwan. But the downside is if we get bogged down in Taiwan, bogged down in Iran, then the United States will lack the military infrastructure to defend Taiwan, and the Chinese are very aware of that, and now they're waiting for us to do something stupid before they just walk over.
Yeah, the whole charade that Trump walked into in China was kind of embarrassing. He was not prepared for their cunning whatsoever.
All right, go into that. I'm curious what you mean. I'm not mad. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I mean, for example, the 300-year-old trees, that really stuck out to me because she rather was definitely pointing it out, showing that look, these trees are older than your country, and Trump's like, oh, do you take everyone to this garden? And just all these little slights, these little turns of phrases, the famous Chinese cunning, were just lost on the whole Trump contingency there. They were ill prepared.
Yeah, well, the Chinese have always been very difficult to do diplomacy with, and part of that is because culturally they see themselves as being like the only country, with everybody else being tributary states. They're very weird. But the Chinese have a long history of getting what they want through negotiations or war or whatever other underhanded techniques they have available. And right now, they're getting what they want because they have full control of the rare earth market globally, which is why the U.S. is pushing so hard for it. But the Chinese machine still runs on a lot of petroleum, and I think that overall the American uh, ambassadors that went over to China, our politicians and billionaires that went over to China, were there to discuss the fact that we both need the strait opened. And China, being the primary backer of Iran, is attempting to leverage additional political pressure to try and get that stupid strait open.
I
It's a
got the
mess.
impression that they're gonna just kind of leave things simmering.
They probably will for a while, but they can't do it for too long.
But how much Iranian oil is getting through? Because I know some of the Chinese shipments are passing through. So I wonder if they could
Um,
leave it closed for a lot more past our pain point than their own.
that they probably can do because a significant portion of the Chinese economy has been electrified at this, hence the BYD cars we were talking about earlier.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think that the global situation is very unstable as long as that strait remains closed. But the United States also has the opportunity. We won't. This is one of the first times I've ever seen a problem we could fix by just printing enough money. But we could. And what you do, it wouldn't be politically popular, but at this point, everyone's mad. But what we could do in the United States is the big bottleneck that the U.S. is running into is that American refineries are mostly specced out to refine Saudi oil, and Saudi refineries are mostly specced out to refine American oil,
Hmm.
which is as derpy as it sounds. But if we dropped $10 billion and respect all the American refineries to American oil, the U.S. would be wholly energy independent, and the U.S. would also be able to then supply the global demand for petroleum, and then the U.S. would be able to just keep the strait closed. Another option I've been proposing. I really think we should do this. All right, I think this would be the best
All right.
solution, which is we negotiate with the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. They wouldn't like it, but they'd put up with it. And Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Oman are the three countries we'd need to talk to about this. And then we drill a bunch of holes between the UAE and Oman, and we cut the tip off the strait with like 30 or 40 atomic bombs, and we
Oh,
make a new
yes, seen this
strait.
plan.
I think it's a great idea. What's the worst that could happen? A little fallout never hurt anybody. But it would make the Iranians very mad. I think it would be what's the good word for it? It would be an excellent way for the United States to mog on foreign countries. Fine, if you close the strait, we'll just make a new one. We can do it. We have the power. Um, but
But as
I
far as
mean,
your first scenario, I
mhm.
think China still comes out on top in that because then there would be less need for the dollar as a reserve currency.
Yes, that does seem to be Chinese play, is to let this simmer for a while and see if they can take more pain than the United States economically, which they can because they have a highly authoritarian government, and hope that the U.S. loses its role as global reserve currency, which is a possibility. Who wrote about that recently on Substack? Somebody wrote recently about the uh, dollar exchange line that's being established with the United Arab Emirates, and we're probably going to have to do that with a number of other nations in that area because if they can't export oil, they lose their ability to purchase goods on the international market. And in order to get those dollars, they would need to sell U.S. Treasury bonds, and if enough U.S. Treasury bonds get sold, it can cause a panic in the market, which drives down the value of the bonds and it increases the interest rates at which the United States needs to purchase while also increasing the dollar supply in circulation, driving up inflation at the same time, in essence creating a mess.
Yeah. Well, that would be wise for him to iron those out quick.
From a European perspective, what do you think about the dominance of the United States dollar as a global reserve currency at this time?
Well, I mean, whenever I approach Europe, I always kind of try to leave my idealism in the back seat. And, pragmatically, I think it's wise for Europe to diversify, but they seem to be more so cozying up closer to Washington, which I think is strategically not the best move, but in the end, there is benefits from it. So I can't be on the top of a mountain saying it's completely wrong to do so.
I mean, I'm just curious, what good options does Europe have at this point? Because it seems like it's just falling out of relevance as a global power completely.
Well, part of the reason why I felt a little bit of affinity towards the Duganite sphere is just energy shortage in Europe in general, and the need to have some dependence on Russian energy. As unpopular as that is, we buy it anyway. We're buying it
Yeah,
just through intermediaries, and we're paying a premium on that. So why not just find a way to normalize relations if possible, and then we can have a flow of energy So these are the kind of diversifications I'm talking about because we are isolating ourselves by giving into every American demand, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't. Who was it? There was a, I think it was Rudyard Lynch, who discussed this on What If Altist, that the global economy seems to be approaching an environment very similar to sort of the 30 Years' War and the Reformation, where you don't have the ability to engage in total war anymore. Which, if you look at the American actions over the last couple of years, does seem to be an idea that the American military is starting to take on, is that we just don't have the capacity to engage in war at scale in the same way that we did in Vietnam or Afghanistan or World War One or World War Two. And instead, what you're seeing is a whole bunch of proxy wars and skirmishes where the goal is usually local and tactical rather than global and strategic. And it's because the cost of war has gone up by so much, while at the same time the population has declined and become ineffective at waging war on that scale anymore. At least that's the impression I have. Is that the entire nature of warfare is changing from a people's war to more of a classic specific trade agreements or specific port access is what people are kind of fighting over. Sort of a medieval style of skirmish warfare.
Yeah, almost a mercenary conflict, but
That's a good
not
point.
quite, I guess, because the proxies are usually disgruntled groups who are weaponized rather than hired guns, but it's similar in concept, similar in execution.
Um, and paying for it all is pretty tricky. So I'm curious what you think about the current like political state of the various European nations. They seem to be falling apart.
I don't
Oh,
think
and
it's
we can talk
cool.
about
Yeah.
Amelia this last spring. Amelia.
Oh, sure. I think it's sort of not as dire as it might seem in American press, but there's definitely a political malaise because the far right parties are growing in popularity, but not popular enough. And then the economic situation, there's tons of great ideas out there that never get implemented. And ideas at the top level, I keep talking for well over a year now about Mario Draghi's report that's supposed to be implemented, but such little progress. So the biggest problem I think we're facing is just people just tired of how long it takes to get anything done here, and it leads to apathy and malaise. And until the bureaucratic machine is oiled up, I'm not really sure how that can change, and I don't really see anyone with the ambitions to streamline it.
Yeah, well, it's because the bureaucratic machine now occupies like 30% of the entire European GDP. All they do is fill out forms and check papers to let people know that forms have been filled out and papers have been checked off.
Yep,
Like,
it's often like that.
it's a mess. I think that what is it? Have you read Leviathan by Sam Francis?
No, no.
Okay, Leviathan and Its Enemies by Sam Francis discusses the development of this managerial class in the West, or globally at this point, where it's no longer like the bourgeoisie property owners that control the societies, but it's like this mid-level management, 50, 60, $70,000 a year Karen types that control the West because their managerial policies are what are functionally enacted as government policy and economic policy and educational policy. And so what you end up with is a whole bunch of credentialism, since basically anyone can do the job. So they create artificial barriers to entry into this class through the form of university credentialism, which is why university degrees are so expensive.
Yeah, it's the McKinseyfication of the world. Because I mean, that company is definitely largely responsible for much of that importation of this mentality. I think it was back in the '70s or '80s. They had the five S's of managerial excellence or something that nearly every company adopted.
I, I've never heard of this. Keep going.
I'd have to dig it up. I could be just misquoting that entirely, but I mean, they get their consultants in not only at the private sector but the government level, and the good business practices and all that stuff. The managerial techniques that were popular 10 years ago, like agile, get replaced ultimately with the next thing. The big consulting firms recommend, also Boston Consulting Group. So a lot of this is filtering down from the upper echelons of the academic class. Yale Management School, Harvard Business Review, etc. Those people that feed right into McKinsey and BGC. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's a mass education of the managerial class from these consulting groups as well.
Yeah, I've definitely I'm frustrated with it because what they're functionally doing is that they are preventing any form of free enterprise and then using these enormous structures in order to prevent people from developing their own ideas. And this is why the internet was so popular. It's because it's one of the few economies they didn't control for about 10 years, and that's why you saw so much innovation online. And then it stagnated pretty heavily in like the last 5 or 6 or 10 years, since like I would argue about 2016, 2017, when they started the great censorship campaigns online. That's kind of when the internet properly stagnated.
Yeah, that really was a death blow, but just in general, the consolidation by all these media groups. So you no longer had a diverse, stratified web. You have everyone on a couple platforms like YouTube, which has been great in its own ways because I find wonderful thinkers and people that you wouldn't expect and people to follow who have thought provoking ideas. But, in the forum days, you did have to hunt for it a little bit more, but you did have a lot more diversity of ideas and pontificating. And because when groups are siloed into their own little forum, there's a lot less groupthink coming from the mainstream culture.
Yeah. I don't know. It feels like the mainstream culture is just trying to disconnect at this point and failing miserably. Uh, what is it? There's TikTok brain. Oh yeah, yeah. That's something I also wanted to bring up with you. How are the Europeans handling like TikTok addiction or the Zoomer brain situation where people just get too brain rotted to function? I think in the United States, literacy rates have dropped significantly in the last couple of years since the pandemic.
Yeah, I saw a very interesting video recently. I think the channel is Andrew Callahan, Channel 5 or something like that. But he does interviews with just on cultural drama with Zoomers. So there was the whole thing like the Goon King who got caught at that bikini drive through masturbating in his car, and then the CEO put it publicly. The guy killed himself. So all these Zoomers are coming out and they made an ironic protest out of it. And it's actually kind of cool. If you listen to them talking, they have some interesting political takes that they've filtered through this whole absurd scenario. But I noticed that about half of them, and granted, I've misspoken throughout this interview, but they're like really like using basic words incorrectly that I'm just like shocked that somebody wouldn't know the definition of such a word, for example. Um, so it seems like half the Zoomers that I encountered in this video are very articulate and intelligent, and the other half are just kind of TikTok brained, like you said.
Yeah,
And as far
it's
as how
bad.
Europe is dealing with it, I can't really speak for Western Europe because I don't go there that much anymore. Here in Hungary, it seems like it depends up ultimately on the parents, and I do see good parents out there who don't have devices in their kids' hands. I do see some totally meme-brained, brain rot kids walking around. I see people filming TikToks in public every so often, etc. But it really seems like at least there's enough parents here that recognize a problem that they've implemented things at home to try to alleviate it.
Yeah, I read an article on this a little while back about sort of the bifurcation that we're going to see between the people who are so inundated with high technology that they functionally become drones for digital systems, and then the people who are from communities that kind of resist it. But given that the people heavily inundated by digital technology seem to have difficulty like leaving the house and having kids, while those who are the most restricted from high technology seem to uh, have the highest fertility rates in the United States. I'm going from an American perspective.
Yeah,
Um,
though I'm
there
sure we
does
can
seem to be
extrapolate
like
these trends
there's going to
wider.
be like this social Darwinian bottleneck, and what's going to come out the other side of it, I think, will be very different. Are you familiar with the Amish population in the U.S.?
Yeah, yeah, I've been to
Yeah,
Amish country, Lancaster.
yeah. The Amish people flipped the vote for Trump in Pennsylvania in 2024.
Yeah, I follow.
Uh,
Excuse me, I follow that story.
400,000 Amish people signed up to vote, and you know they voted because they're Amish, and they wouldn't sign up if they weren't going to do it. But he only won Pennsylvania by I think 1 or 200,000 votes. So they were the ones that flipped the vote in Pennsylvania. But what's interesting about this is that every generation, the Amish have like an average of 6 to 8 kids. And so what I anticipate is going to happen is that over the next 100 years or so, these relatively small niche religious communities are going to become plurality voters in most of the world in various ways, depending on the religious groups, because they're going to be the ones that have the highest fertility rate, and they're also going to be the ones that are most resistant to digital technology.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're definitely gonna sustain themselves longer than many other groups. I just wonder because a lot of our conversation keeps drifting back to, I guess, the virtues of religion in a secular
True.
society. Uh, I, I see it, but I just wonder in the long term, is that going to really help us? And let me get a little I guess, idealistic for a moment. I do want our technology to keep increasing. I do want us to go to space, the stars, and conquer more realities. I don't know if that's the right vehicle for it.
I think I agree that it may not be the right vehicle, but I also think that we, as a species, need like a couple hundred years to work our shit out without constant radical technological development. Like we have to work out how to interact with these systems for the next couple of hundred years. We need a break, okay? Give
I
us a
think you
break.
might be
We
right.
were we went from like 1869 and the height of military technology is like the horse-drawn carriage to 1969 and the moon landing in a single lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, and we've gone from the telegraph to AI in a single lifetime. We just need a break. Just give us a few generations to just chill for a minute and see what happens. And honestly, I think that at some point relatively soon, we're probably going to get that. Um, which will result in it'll probably correlate to the catastrophic fertility collapse and demographic collapse that we're going to undergo. But there's probably going to be a period of stability in the relatively near future that will truncate this period of just radical and wild technological development. And that longer period of stability, I'd say, is where you're more likely to get the rollout of machines that fill economic labor positions the way humans generally do. And it's also going to be where we switch from an always connected environment to this is based on a book that I read. What was the name of it? Accelerando is the name of the book. But we're going to switch to an environment where machines and AI systems tend to occupy digital spaces while humans are kind of driven back to physical spaces, which again is very irritating for those of us who grew up on the internet and like the Wild West feel of it. But the necessity of returning to being physical entities, I think, is pretty important over the next couple hundred years. So we'll see how that goes. Especially if instead of using social media, you can just ask your personal AI, what are the important things I need to know that are like relevant to my life.
I get two trains of thought from that. One that, yeah, I mean, ultimately there's truth to that, but there is also the risk of innovation ceasing because it's no longer important for society to function. So there is that risk of turning into kind of sort of a mini dark age. And on the other hand, though, culturally speaking, spiritually speaking, I heard a older British gentleman on a Twitter space the other day talking about how his big problem with just the Western mind is that they've invested so much into the soul and the mind that they've forgotten the body completely. And there's some truth to that criticism. And yeah, maybe we do need to reorient ourselves to the physical, get back in touch with that. I think that's why bodybuilding is so popular on the right now. And it's a good thing to be in touch with your body, you know? It's a good thing to feel it and feel when there's something wrong and, care about nutrition and all.
My guess is actually that the New World is going to take a predominant philosophical position in the coming century or so, because the weird small religious groups that came out that were sort of prosecuted out of Europe in the 1600s, 1700s, and came to the New World are going to become like the majority or a significant plurality of the total population. Like I said, the Amish, Hutterites, a couple of others. I think it's Bolivia. Are you familiar with like the Bolivian birth rate?
No.
Okay, let me look it up. All right, I'm looking it up right now. So what's interesting about Bolivia? So Bolivia is like this little South American country, right?
Yeah, it's very
Unless
indigenous,
I'm,
that much I know.
yeah, yeah. But what I find very interesting is that the birth rate of like the Hutterites have become a significant percentage of their total birth rate this last couple of years.
Hmm.
Let me see. I'm trying to figure out what I think it was Bolivia. I'm trying to find it online. I don't see it. I know that it's somewhere. I'll have to look it up.
I mean, I know they
But
have such populations in Chile and Argentina as well, up in the mountains.
yeah, so they've got these like weird little German religious communities that formed in these countries over the last couple of hundred years because they were kind of driven out of the old world for being religious weirdos. But now because they've maintained a high fertility rate despite modern technology because they don't use modern technology, because they've maintained a high fertility rate, they're starting to become like 2-3% of the entire population for the next generation. And after that, again, 6 to 8 kids each, everyone else is having like less than one. There's a good chance that they could double that every every generation. So it goes 2% to 4%, 8%, 16%. So over the course of like 3 or 4 generations, you could see these countries becoming significant plurality, like these weird European religious communities.
Hmm. Well, God bless them.
Yeah.
They did something right.
Well, and then they're also, because they're going to be there's going to be so many of them. They're going to have a significant effect on the philosophy of uh, at least New World civilization is a good way to put it.
Yeah. Well, that would be
I
interesting to see play out if we live in interesting times.
Yeah, we do. We definitely do. Um, and that's why, to go all the way back to how we first started this conversation, religious communities like that, these extremely sort of independent, isolated Christian communities, I would argue have a stronger vitalistic spirit than a lot of the traditional European religious Christian communities at this point, because they're actually doing the thing. They're actually having the kids and building the farmhouse and organizing the community around shared interests.
Yeah. Well, I'm
Um,
always for such communities in general to maintain their, culture and pass it down because I do think that's something that makes the human experience very rich is to not subsume everyone into the, consumerist homogenous slop that most of us live in.
we'll
But
call it the global homogenist culture, or globo homo for sure, for short.
yep, globo homo. I mean, we're most of us are living in it. Envy them a little bit. I just, I hope they can maintain it, but
I do
I don't
too.
know. I guess what if I sound like a little bit like frazzled by it, I guess I just wonder how does it help us, you know?
That's a good question. Have you ever read the book? Very few people have because it's not in print anymore. But have you ever read or heard of the book Fitzgerald's War?
I've heard of the book actually. And I may have seen it covered in a conspiratoid YouTube channel long ago, but I don't recall.
That would be Feral Historian, probably, who is on Substack and whom you should probably also subscribe to.
I will check that out.
Um,
Didn't know that.
he's a really smart guy. I'd really like to sit down and talk to him at some point. I don't live. I need to bug him. But Feral Historian is very interesting as an individual. But Fitzgerald's War is a particularly interesting book because the book takes place in a world that's sort of gone through the technological revolution that we have, and then also most of the global population has been elected to engage in, for lack of better phrasing, like technologically throwback culture. So you have the majority population in North America in the book of Fitzgerald's Wars, like 300 years in the future, and they're like neo Amish people, and so they're using like steam engines and whatnot, but they also have relatively high technology when you actually need it. It's fascinating the way that they use it as a tool rather than as a lifestyle, as I understand it from the context of the book.
Mm-hmm.
It has a little bit of a steampunk thing going for it, and I think that's a choice on the part of the author. But I could
I'm
see
quite
a
partial to
future where,
steampunk. I like it.
yeah,
There's something about steam engines, or I don't know, they're luring.
I like diesel punk myself, but maybe I just like the 1920s. The idea that you can have high technology, but limit your cultural use of it without having to restrict access to it, I think is something that we're going to develop over the next few hundred years, unless we get wild technological developments and do the whole sort of the singularity thing. Because who the hell knows where things are going at this point? In theory, I think that after this, we've got a biological revolution because we can use AI to analyze mass data sets for biological systems. But after that, I'm not sure if we've got another major technological restructuring in us as a civilization, at least for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I don't think light speed is going to be conquered anytime soon. But who knows?
I mean, maybe fusion, but fusion's always been 20 years away.
Yeah. One of those things they keep pushing the deadline back.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know
fusion
there's a
is
couple CERN experiments that showed promise, but yeah, nothing feasible on a mass scale.
Yeah, well, the problem with fusion is that to actually make a proper surplus doing it, we're going to need. I mean, hell, I could eat my words in a year, but we're going to need some much more complex systems than what we're running right now. It's just so difficult to contain a fusion system.
Mm.
They're very hot. Um, if you can do like muon assisted fusion, that would help. But they require very pure materials, very high temperature, uh, magnetic containment vessels. However, the other problem is that fusion gets more efficient the bigger your fusion system. And so small experiments will never show an energy profit, so to speak,
Mm.
because the difficulty of performing fusion increases with the surface area, but the amount of energy it gives off increases with the volume. So it's a square cube law situation where To make it work, you have to make it very, very big and very, very expensive.
Mm. Yeah, well, good luck finding the money for that.
Yeah, that's the problem. Is you can't do that in an economic environment where the currencies are worthless and where
Yeah.
productivity is fake. I feel like that's what it is. It's productivity is just fake at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is a casino at this point.
Yeah, which is why you have people gambling on Polymarket. And you've got who was it the other day? Jamie Dimon, maybe that might have been him. But he's like, well, the problem is that kids these days they just don't want to save money for a house. You know, you could make a down payment on a $500,000 house if you save. If you eat ramen noodles and never leave your house for the next 5 or 6 years, and you're like, okay, but how much will the price of a house have changed by then?
Yeah, yeah. These arguments are so out of touch with the actual mathematics of things, and the average salary for the average house price rather doesn't match at all. You'd
It's
have to be
like
making at
120,
least
$130,000 now, isn't it? A year?
you'd have to be making that, yeah, to be able to realistically put away for a family, put away for retirement, and to have all your financial checklists fulfilled. Yeah, you should be making about that much money, which very few people are. So the whole equation's fucked, and yeah, the boomers don't want to acknowledge it. It's very, very, very annoying. I run into this conversation far too often, and you can educate them, and they keep falling back to bootstraps.
They're, this is why people hate them.
I know, so
This
stubborn.
is
It's unbelievable.
and delusional.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not happy about the that environment.
The Massey
And
race is, oh my god, like that's just an
uh,
indictment on boomers.
it is. The Massey race really they pulled out all the stops to try and prevent him from being successful. From prevent our guy from being successful in his political race. So
And at the end of all of that, they only spent $300 a vote, which is quite cheap if you think about it. So they
that's
didn't even have
true.
to spend that much money to fuck us all over.
I
Yeah,
mean, why don't they
ominous.
just? They could at least just bribe us.
Right?
Like, just bribe us for the votes at this point.
I thought they were
They
going to do
don't
that with
care,
tariff bucks, and I was looking forward to it.
right? But they're not going to do that with tariff bucks because you are a useless fucking eater, and they want robots to build their future cities.
Yeah, and it kind of is similar in concept to the TARP bailouts with the banking crisis. They could have given all that money to the individual Americans, and they could have paid their mortgages and not gone to foreclosure. But
Right?
instead, the bank's got
You
to have
hear
that
the
money.
biggest fu to the American people that I've seen in a while? It came from the Supreme Court of all places.
Hmm.
Um, so it was ruled that a bunch of Trump's tariffs were illegal.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that.
yeah. And so they're going to have to pay back the money that was spent on the tariffs, paying off the tariffs by these massive corporations that ordered the stuff from foreign countries,
Who already marked up the consumer?
who already marked it up to the consumer. I am so
Free
mad.
money. It's free money.
Yeah,
That's what
they're
that
just getting
is.
free money. What possible grounds do they have for just paying back these mega corporations for marking up their shit already?
Well, I'm glad you're
Just
feeling
say,
some of the pain we millennials felt with TARP because I can't even feel the same anger you do because I've already gone through this. The TARP thing had me mad for years.
I, so, I think we're close to the same age, actually. I was pissed off about TARP too, but this is just so flagrant this time. There's not even anything. I'm so mad.
Oh, I thought you were
The
a bit
money
younger
is
than me.
fake.
I know
No,
I'm
I
feeling
think we're.
old these days.
I'm not going to ask your age, but are you like in your 30s or your 40s?
I'm in my 30s.
Okay, yeah, we're in the same age bracket.
Okay, okay.
Um,
I was in the impression that you were like a very well read Zoomer for some reason.
well, I appreciate that. I'll take that as an enormous compliment. I could either be of the brain rot generation or of the millennial generation, so I'll take it as a compliment. Thank you. But I'm so frustrated with the way our economic system just screws us at every turn.
Oh yeah,
There's
yeah.
no there's no fix.
No, yeah. All you can do is kick the wall once in a while.
Yeah. I mean, buy Bitcoin, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at the price in a while. Know if it's the right time to buy, but I mean, yeah, it doesn't hurt.
What is it today? I'll pull it up real quick. Today, the value of Bitcoin is about $77,000
Yeah,
and
probably a decent
dropping.
entry. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah, yeah.
probably a decent entry point. It was going up for a while. It made it up to what was it, like 82,000 a couple days ago. So,
Well, it made it over
uh,
100,000, so I'd be bullish on getting back there and probably surpassing
yeah,
it.
probably sometime in the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it tends to be
4 year
2 year
cycles
cycles
and
in
all that.
crypto. Yeah,
4 year cycles in crypto.
I guess there's a mini 2 year bull rush usually, but
Uh,
yeah, never like the super cycle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I would. now or sometime in the next year or two is definitely an entry point if historic cycles maintain their behavior. On the other hand, the U.S. currency could go down the toilet at any point, so who knows?
Yeah, but then
Um,
we're all screwed. So you might as well try to squeeze money out if you can. And then if
yeah,
it all crashes to the bottom, we're all in the same boat anyway.
I mean, what was it? There was another article that I read recently that discussed how the West is sort of entering a post-capitalism era, where once you have your bare necessities paid for, what matters much more is your connections and the political connections and the people you know, rather
Absolutely,
than your income.
absolutely.
There was
Yep. The
there was an
job market's all
anecdotal
networks and
story.
favors at
Yeah,
this
it
point.
is at this point. I'm looking for employment at a couple of places, and it's solely because of the people I know, and it has absolutely nothing to do with any job applications I've sent out, or in this case, not sent out, because it's a losing game and there's no reason to play.
Yeah,
So
the
I'm
hack is finding someone on LinkedIn and trying to start a convo with them. If you really don't have a connection, you need to make one. It is
yeah,
possible. That like at least half those people are willing to give you 15 minutes on a call for at least career advice, and that's always valuable.
it is. And this is like the advantage of a university is the connections you can make through with the university. It
Depends on
has
the
a whole lot
university you
more.
go to, of course. So
Yeah,
because if you're not going to a top rung one, your connections are going to be kind of dog shit.
yeah. Go to one of the top universities for the discipline you're interested in
If you
because they'll have
can,
the industry connection.
could be out of reach for some people, but yeah, strive for it.
Well, if a top university in your chosen discipline is out of reach, pick a different discipline because there's a bunch of different specialist universities.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if you have a good thesis idea, they'll give it a time of day, even if your grades were poor. But there's people who maybe slacked off for their bachelor's and want to get back into it. Now they're more serious and they're on their back foot. So there's all kinds of circumstances where the ideal doesn't play out. You got to put in a little extra work. You got to network a little harder, etc.
I mean, everybody's got to put in some extra work at this point. It's so
Yeah,
hard to
yeah,
find
yeah.
employment.
But even more so if you're, I didn't graduate top uni. I was a lazy student, so kind of
Based.
speaking from experience a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's frustrating. And I mean, millennials at least saw what the world was like in the '90s when people had the expectation of being able to live their lives if they worked hard.
Yep.
And
They told
people are
us that
like, why
lie.
don't the Zoomers want to work hard? Well, what are you paying them?
Yep.
Nothing.
Yep.
Kids these days, they just don't want to work. Well, employers these days, they just don't want to pay you.
Yeah, they don't want to pay you, and they don't. If you don't have the cleanest resume right out of college, going to a FANG company or something, you're already on a back foot.
Yeah,
They don't really admire startup experience and where you really learn the ropes of business. That kind of stuff is irrelevant to them. They're really looking for that managerial cutout that they can fit you with their algorithm. And so, yeah, if you're already dealing on a back foot, yeah, you got to really talk to people and make them see that you're valuable.
yeah. Um, it's so the job market's so frustrating. This is
Oh,
the
I know.
reason so many people are dropping out of the workforce entirely. I
Oh,
think it's
yeah. I
what
mean,
over ten
I've been
percent of young men.
it's bleak, and I've been on a consultancy gigs for like 2 years now. So because I got laid off in the whole tech layoff situation, and since then I've been having to do my own projects. I've been trying to find my own clients, doing a little bit of everything, doing a little writing, doing a little rebranding for some companies. I mostly do marketing consultancy, and then that also has required me to go outside my wheelhouse of tech startups. And I've even worked with I had to learn all this stuff about dental supplies, like gutta percha sealants for root canals, and because you got to know your client's, product if you're trying to help them sell it.
Yeah, no, it's just wild. Um,
I shouldn't be
how
doing
much of
this.
a
I should
mess we
just be in
found
my field
ourselves.
doing my thing. Is I guess what I'm driving
Mhm.
at. But this market causes us to have to really seek opportunities much more fiercely.
And even then, it's pretty rare for somebody to do better than scraping by.
Yeah, and especially when you're on a consultancy contract basis, there's periods where you're doing well and you can enjoy life a little more, and there's periods where you got to tighten the belt because the money's not consistent. Serial
Precariat
entrepreneurs go
class.
through the same thing.
Yep. They call it the precariat class, where you are perpetually, precariously in and out of the economy.
Hmm.
And
Interesting. There's a name for what I've been doing.
yep, the precariat class. And the thing is, the precariat class can be both gig workers and full-time consultants and shit because you don't know when your next contract is coming.
Yep, yep. Yeah, it's
So
I
I'm
don't.
running up. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just saying I don't envy college graduates right now. I mean, I remember the job market I went into. Part of the reason I went overseas at all is there was nothing. So I teach English. I can travel a little, and
Yep.
I tried to turn that into something bigger because I got really specialized in business English. So
Mhm.
I tried to make that into a company, but then COVID hit,
Yep.
and that wasn't feasible. Then I had to take some really shitty jobs, and then I pivoted back to marketing, which is something I've been doing for smaller creators and social media for years anyway. So you got to dip in and out of experience too, man. I don't know. I just trying to give a good takeaway after all that bleak stuff. I guess for the Zoomers, just try to find some other side gigs to develop other skills because I never relied on one career path because I was not the golden person who graduated with my honors and went right into the company I wanted to. So you gotta get
Yeah,
creative.
I think most people are very frustrated with trying as hard as they are to survive and just not having the opportunities that they were maybe not promised, but
But a
they were
healthy
sold
society
on.
would afford to them.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They have not been afforded the opportunities that a healthy society would have afforded them.
Yep.
Um, and instead, they want to bring in 10,000 more Indians every month to San Francisco and every other city in the United States. Yay!
Yeah, and there's despair that comes with that. I would just warn from my millennial experience suffering this myself is that you got to go through those 5 stages of grief and then just find something that you can seize on and build what you can for yourself. Because it's pretty easy to give up, and we've all gone through periods of giving up and feeling despondent. But I do see with Zoomers a total surrender, and I would warn that your life will pass you by and you'll regret that at some point because it's not fun to be like the 50-year-old bachelor who still thinks his hobbies are cool. And you catch him at the bar, you got to drink with him. He's got some interesting stories, but he goes back to a sad life. And there's a great movie with Mad Mikkelsen called Another Round, where one of his friends is in this position, and it's kind of highlights how that's a empty path, and you gotta take the boomer advice to some little extent and not fall into the trap of despair.
Yeah, it's that's the advice. Seize the vital spirit
Yeah,
of your life, whether they want you to or
absolutely,
not.
absolutely. Because
And
you
if
can
nothing
find
else,
something, even if it's not perfect, you can find
yeah,
something good.
I do think that we're going to see a lot more Zoomers shooting up various political or economic facilities here in the future. The warehouse Luigi. Did you see that guy a
I
couple
did,
months
yeah.
ago? Yeah, I think we're going to get a lot more of those of people that
Yeah,
are just like,
well,
I don't care anymore.
I hope they
So,
target
so
the
either,
veins of the organism that's crushing them instead of,
yeah,
like the school shooters. That's kind of a waste. Dark to put it that way, but when things get so bad, you gotta let the system know. And I wouldn't be one to sacrifice my life for it, but I guess there is some nobility in doing so.
yeah, I can't fault Zoomers who have just had enough.
No, I
Um,
can empathize, which is why I speak the way I do
I
about it.
I'm gonna try not to do anything like that, but damn, am I frustrated with our political system. So I'm coming up here pretty soon. I've got to. You're in Europe. I'm in the United States. I've got to go to work here pretty soon. So we should wrap it up.
It was a great convo.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I know it's kind of hard to schedule these things.
Oh, no worries. I think it went like I thought we'd have a bit more disagreements. We didn't get touched on the Amelia and the slopulism and all, but I'm just happy to have to see signs of vitality and what I'm perceiving as a movement I'm trying to kind of distance myself from a little bit. So that for me was an optimistic element to this conversation we had.
Like I said, thank you for coming. I really appreciate it. It does seem that there's real
Hmm.
cultural pushback happening now, especially in places like the
Yep.
UK and the United States, where people are just absolutely tired of our government apparatuses, especially in the U.S., acting on behalf of foreign powers. It's a good way to put it. There does seem to be a future on the other side of all this. It's just going to take a lot of work to get there, and there's going to be probably a number of additional warehouses burnt to the ground between now and then, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time, and this is kind of hard to schedule, but we're going to do it anyway. So
Yeah.
thanks.
Just hope for the best and keep thinking good ideas. That's all I can
Boom,
do.
boom, boom.